Welcome to Conversations with Tom Shorkey. Conversations explores the past, the present, and the future of the communities in which we live through the eyes of interesting individuals. Now let's join our host, Tom Shorkey.
Welcome to Conversations. I'm your host for today's program, Tom Shorkey. We do have a very interesting and unique guest today. Our guest is Pansey Shorkey, and on November 3rd, she will be 100 years old. Yes, you recognize the last name. Pansey is my aunt, married to my father's younger brother. Pansey has been part of my entire life, but I think more importantly for our listeners at home, you are going to hear from a vivacious, energetic, very young 100-year-old woman. Welcome to our show, Pansey. Pansey, born in 1917 in Missouri.
That's right.
Now, tell our listeners, tell me about 1917 and into the roaring 20s. What was it like to grow up on a farm in rural Missouri in the 20s?
Actually, it was a lot of fun. I had my own horse and learned to ride, so I didn't know any different. And I went to a little one-room schoolhouse until the 8th grade, when the stock market crashed in 1929, and we lost the farm. My dad lost his money.
Well, the whole world kind of tipped upside down in 1929.
Yes, it did.
And you were only going to be 12 years old
Yes.
in 29. And the Great Depression, which so many of our listeners have only read about, they have not actually witnessed it or lived through it. You were a high school kid in the 30s. Tell us a little bit about, after the farm, what happened?
We moved to a town, Marshall, Missouri, which was about 10,000 population. So I went from one-room schoolhouse to a 3-story high school. That it was very dramatic because I would get lost. And I had a first cousin that was a senior. He would find me and take me to my classroom. But I saw bread lines. The Depression was bad. You ate what they put on the table because there was no more.
And your father got a job
He got a job on the Missouri River, which was only about a half a mile away. So he was gone a lot. And then I had an older brother that also worked on the Missouri River.
You had mentioned some things about that high school. Actually, for the 1930s, you had quite a progressive high school.
Our high school was it was ahead of its time.
In what way?
We had a 500-seat
Auditorium.
theater.
Yeah, theater, yeah.
And in my class, I learned in our gymnasium. I did baseball, soccer, basketball, and they taught us to dance. So it was a school ahead of its time.
Now, you would have graduated from high school in 1935, the midst of the Depression.
Yes.
What does an 18-year-old kid do?
I babysat for 25 cents a night. That was all you could get.
And then eventually, what kind of job did you?
Eventually, they had a shoe factory in Marshall. Eventually, I got a job at the shoe factory. It was piecework. You got paid for what you did.
And then, and that was, as we got into the late 30s, and there were rumblings of maybe war. And,
the war had started in Europe.
Now which many people, I did not even know this.
Yeah.
You were a widow at age 22.
Yes.
Tell our audience about.
Well, he worked at the
early
shoe
life.
factory also, and we were married in April of 1939, and he only lived 8 months. He died from a mosquito bite.
And like
So then Remington Arms built a big ammunition factory in Kansas City. So I felt like I had to get out of my hometown, and so I went there and got a job working for the Army Ordnance Department, testing ammunition. I tested 25 millimeter and carbine.
And that was your job, and that
That was my job.
Was that about the time we entered the war?
1940, yes,
In
40.
the 40s.
I was working there in 1941 when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
Well, then your job became really important.
Yes, it did. Yes.
Now, and while you were working there, somebody fixed you up on a blind date to go roller skating
Yes.
with a kid from Michigan.
Yes. Ed came down, his brother-in-law, Carl Sam, worked for General Motors, and they sent him down. They built a big airplane factory, Kansas City, so they sent him down, and Ed came down to work in the aircraft factory, and I was working for the Army Ordnance Department in the ammunition factory, but I boarded rooming with some girls, and he was rooming with a fellow, but one of the girls was a sister to the man he was rooming with. So they called one night. There was a big roller skating rink in downtown Kansas City. They wanted us to go roller skating, so I was a roller skater. So we did, and that's where I met Ed, my husband.
Was he a good roller skater?
Terrible. But he was good looking.
Well, and that was during the war, and then Ed was part of the Air Corps, and you had your munitions job.
Yeah.
And then he got transferred, but he said, before I leave Kansas City, what did he do?
When he joined the Air Corps, they sent him to Jackson, Tennessee, to college for 5 months. So he wanted to get married, and it was Lent. So we were married on St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day in Tennessee.
Yes, yeah. And the marriage license was $5 instead of $2 in Michigan.
No, there you go. Well, it was worth the price. Now, so during the war, Ed had different assignments around the country, so what did you do?
I went where he was stationed and went to work on the air base all over the United States.
So your munitions training with Remington,
Yes,
you could get a job at any.
Yeah.
What are some of the stops you made during?
Well, Madison, Wisconsin, in the winter, 20 below zero.
Oh boy.
Then San Antonio, Texas, Altus, Oklahoma, and then Florida.
Now, you're in
And
Florida.
we were in Florida in 1945, and I was working on the air base, of course, and he was stationed there, and that's when both wars were over.
And he said, Pansey, I'd like you to visit Marine City, Michigan.
Oh,
And you were in Florida.
that's right.
What time of year was it? Was it
I will never forget, Tom. It was May the 13th, and I arrived in Marine City, sandals on, no hose, really, really light jacket on, and it was snowing a blizzard.
Welcome to Michigan. Well, after the war, the war ended, you were, and Rich came along about
Rich
that
came
time?
along.
1946 was your...
Yes, he was born May the 9th, 1946, and Ed got home with his discharge 20 minutes before he was born.
Perfect timing.
In Marshall, Missouri, yeah.
So then you lived in Missouri for a couple years?
We
before,
did,
and then
in Kansas City, and it was hard to get an apartment. Apartments were scarce because nothing was built during the war. So, and nobody wanted to rent with a child if you had a child. and Rich was 2 years old. So that's when Ed wanted to come back to Marine City.
And Ed came back and meat cutter at
He cut meat
Beatty's
for Jim Beatty for 12 years.
And for our listeners at home, if they ever go to Anita's for half-off pizza on Monday night, that's where Beatty's grocery store was,
Yes.
where Ed was the
Yes.
butcher. But he moonlighted. There was a little job in the neighborhood he did a couple nights a week.
They built a little corner grocery, so he would work there nights.
And then the guy that owned the corner grocery thought it was time for him to sell and retire, and
We bought it.
and you bought it. So that little corner store that's still there, kind of on M29 as you make the curve, just west of the
Yes.
bridge,
Yes.
was Shorkey's Corner Grocery for a long time, probably
We were there
40
28 years.
28 years it
Yeah.
was Shorkey's. But along the way, you thought, well, maybe this little grocery store should have a liquor license.
Yes.
Well, how did you manage that?
I knew Catherine Springborn. Her husband died, and she was closing the drugstore. So we bought out the liquor license. But I ran that store for 5 years.
And that little store was on Broadway. I don't even know
Yes.
what's in that building, down by close to the city hall.
Yes.
And then that was Shorkey's liquor store for
Yes.
5 years.
Yes.
And then you put it all together over there on,
Yeah, and built on and
Oh,
moved it, put it together.
and then the really the good story, I think, is when you guys retired. Tell me about touring the United States.
What we did when we sold the store. When we sold the store in 1983, we started traveling by car. But in California, I had a lot of family living there, and my son lived in San Francisco. So we started traveling. So we went by car to every state in the 48, and we drove all the way across Canada from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and we enjoyed every moment of it.
And even there was a story one time about you behind the wheel in Texas, and what happened?
I was driving, and it was 11 o'clock one morning, and sunny, and Ed was sleeping, and there was no one on the road. We were on Interstate 10 in Texas. And so I was driving on the inside lane because it was better, but I went to sleep. And when the car hit the gravel, Ed woke up in a hurry.
But nobody got hurt. And you kept on driving.
Yeah.
Well, back in 60s, 70s, you were very active in Marine City. I think you were, was it a square dance group you were
Yes,
part
we
of at
did.
one time?
In the 60s, we square danced, and we go to even Niagara Falls and Toronto square dancing.
And then somebody got the hot idea to buy snowmobiles.
Yes, Ed did, my husband. So we each had our own snowmobile, but mine had an electric start. His didn't.
So he probably wanted yours more than his. And then a number of card clubs, a lot of friends,
Yes.
active with Holy Cross. And one of the things, Pansy, is when somebody, very rarely do people get to be 100, I think it happens, but to stay as active as you have. And one of the things in my research on longevity is staying active and walking. Do you still walk, or you used to walk often in Marine City?
I did up until last year when I got arthritis in my right knee. So I have to do my walking inside Mallard's Landing, where I live now.
So for our audience at home, we have a 98-year-old woman. She lived in the Bell River Apartments on the west side of the Bell River, and her normal routine would be walk across the bridge, walk through town, cross the other bridge, and get home until she was 98 years old. Walk to church when you wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that being an active lifestyle. Now, socially, you've always had a lot of friends. You played a lot of cards. I stopped into Mallard Landing to see if you'd like to be on the conversation
Yes,
show, and I
yeah.
had to interrupt a euchre game.
Yes.
So you still get out and about pretty well.
Oh, I do. I mean, I don't sit home. I think older people, if they sit in their chair, that's the worst thing they can do. They have to stay active.
And we wanted to, I was going to tape this show on a Thursday, but you told me I couldn't do it on Thursday. How come?
I go to my euchre club on every Thursday afternoon.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then when I was visiting with Pansey at Mallard the other day, people stopped in. They wanted to make sure who was picking her up for Mass, but then how was she going to get to the harvest dinner? And you had it all figured out, who was going to pick you up, where you were going to go in between, and what time everybody should make it to the harvest dinner at Holy Cross.
Yeah.
So that, I think, being on the move is something you're very good at.
Well,
But you know, when we talk about longevity, they also say that it kind of runs in families. Did your brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents, were there some long lives?
well, my mother died at 79 and my dad died at 89. My oldest brother died at 94 and my youngest brother died at 96.
Wow.
So,
I think it's in the genes there
yeah,
someplace.
yes, I think so too, yes.
You know, and Pansey, when you talk about being active, I saw you at a Christmas parade in Marine City just a couple of years ago,
Yes.
and you were with your good friend Mrs. Simons, and I said, well, you ladies are probably done for the night, and you said, oh no, the Mariners have a home playoff game tonight. We're on our way to the stadium.
Yeah,
I think the message that I glean from Pansey Shorkey, if you want to have that healthy long life, is to stay active, keep doing things,
definitely.
exercise. To me, you're the same size you've always been.
I am, yes, I've never changed. And I go, every Mariners game I can go to.
That is good. And you had a grandson that played for the Mariners a few
Yes, he
years
did.
ago.
Yes, he
and,
did.
That made Grandma especially proud to
Yeah,
have orange
yeah.
and black on. What is there a secret to living a long time, or?
I don't know if you're just lucky,
Yeah.
but I keep thinking that maybe God wants me to do something, but He doesn't tell me what it is.
So you have to hang around until
So I
you
have
can
to hang
find that
around,
out.
right?
Pansey, what's the hardest part of being the oldest kid on the block? I mean, is it?
Well, I think for me, the hardest thing is I want to move like I used to move, and I can't. To me, that's the hardest thing, for me.
How about handling that checkbook? Do you still do that one?
Oh, I hate to do the checkbook. When my son comes, he's going to be...
Well, I think between your son and your husband, Ed,
Yeah.
there weren't two more fastidious people keeping all those numbers correct. So,
Yeah. I never had to do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's one job I really don't like.
well, we would all hope to be 99, going to turn 100, and our biggest problem was a checkbook, for sure. Any advice to younger people? And when I say younger, let's talk about people in their 70s or in their 80s. Because it doesn't seem like sometimes people just think, well, I've lived my life, but look at what you've been able to do for the last 20 years.
One thing, I think if anyone is smoking, they're not going to live that long.
I think it's great advice.
That definitely is one thing. So otherwise, I don't know. I guess maybe it's your DNA. I really don't know.
Well, you know, I think you've hit it on the head, because I did a little bit of research before we did today's show about people that turn 100. Mm-hmm. Well, in many of the things that you've accomplished, where you stayed active and you walked, you have a large circle of friends, social activities. They say people that belong to churches live longer, but it has nothing to do with religion. It's the fact that they've got people to hang around with in activities. They talk about if you have brothers or sisters. They talk about maintaining decent weight, which you have. And they also talk about if you have children, like in your mid or late 30s, it's an indication that maybe your body isn't aging as fast. We've talked about Rich a couple times. How about that other child you have?
Libby?
No, Christine.
Oh, Chris.
Let's not skip over the mother.
Oh, yes. Yes, well, she really does good. I mean, she exercises and she really takes care of herself.
And how many grandchildren do we have now?
Well, when my grandson has 3 boys.
Oh, great.
And my granddaughter that lives in Georgia, she has a girl and a boy, and she's expecting another boy.
Perfect.
So I will end up with 5 great-grandsons and 1 great-daughter.
Well, I'm really proud to have had you on our show today. And for our audience at home, you will see Pansey around, especially if you go to Mariner football games. Pansey is the walking, talking example of take care of yourself a little bit. No one who knows Pansey and has been around Pansey would say she's anything but positive, and she certainly does not look her age. Thanks for being our guest today, Pans.
Thank you, Tom.
You've been watching Conversations with Tom Shorkey. Conversations explores the past, the present, and the future of the communities in which we live through the eyes of interesting individuals. If you have an idea for a future conversation, please contact us at www.watchctv.org. Thanks for watching Conversations with Tom Shorkey.